Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Parks. I'm really delighted to be here this morning talking to you all. Thanks to Joey and Sander and the team for inviting me to contribute to this CRM September initiative that they've set up in the Netherlands. First of all, apologies. Your English is way better than my Dutch. And so this is in English, and I very much appreciate that. Secondly, for those who don't know me, I've been around in the Dynamics channel for quite a while. I actually joined Microsoft in 2003. I was a CRM partner technology specialist for version 1.2. So my history with the product goes back a long way. That's not to say that I always worked in Dynamics in my career at Microsoft. I left in 2016, joined Companion around a similar time frame. And what I'd like to talk to you about today, three very specific things that we discussed that were on the agenda. And those things were, let's make sure my click works. There we go. Those things were Microsoft Viva Sales. It was a piece on Wave 2 2022, and also Dataverse integration with Business Central. So that's around kind of synchronizing entities or options, opportunities. I know in the agenda invite, it talked about using the connector, and we're going to talk about using more than just the connector. We're going to talk about options and things that are possible with the kind of the myriad of ways that you can use to connect to Business Central through Dataverse. Originally, the team asked me to cover Wave 2 2022. My feedback is that that was going to be a little bit dry. And one of the things that I also noticed is that a lot of for me, perhaps the biggest impact in Wave 2022 can be seen through Microsoft Viva Sales. And so I thought if I do a piece on Microsoft Viva Sales first, it will bring some context to this enhancement in Wave 2 2022. And then we can talk more about the other things that are in that wave before we talk about the integration. So Microsoft Viva Sales. And first up, how do Microsoft bill Viva Sales? And Microsoft, if you go onto their website, it says that Viva Sales is a seller experience application. And that it lets sellers use Office 365 and Microsoft Teams to automatically capture data into any CRM system, any being a keyword there, eliminating manual data entry and giving more time to focus on selling. So there's a real interesting focus here on the word any when it comes to CRM systems. We first heard about Viva Sales prior to Microsoft Inspire. It was June this year when we first kind of got wind of this. So, you know, what is it? What's it for? I think the first thing that we need to say here is that Microsoft Viva Sales is positioned on top of Microsoft Viva. And I know that sounds really obvious, but many folks from a Dynamics background aren't yet aware of what Microsoft Viva is. It's a Microsoft 365 product, and it's a product around employee experience and engagement. Microsoft Viva has been around since the start of 2021. So we're kind of coming up to kind of 2 years since the release of Microsoft Viva. Now, if you are unaware of what Viva is, you've probably been using it without actually knowing, or using part of it without actually knowing. So anyone out there who's using Outlook as part of Office 365, you're probably familiar today with the daily briefing email that lands in your inbox, and it encourages you to prepare for meetings. It highlights actions. It gives you the ability to mark actions as done or to get reminders for those, and that lands in a daily briefing email in your inbox. And that's based on kind of artificial intelligence or AI in messages that you've sent that Microsoft is scanning and suggesting possible actions for. That's one part of Microsoft Viva. So understanding that and the AI and the ability that it brings to kind of give you personal reminders or suggest actions, that's a key thing here to think about when we talk about Viva Sales, because Viva Sales is an extension to this. It's designed to bring everything from the CRM system into one place through automatic logging, tracking, and also then provide the ability on one screen, on many screens, to display the client details, the contact details, AI guided actions, the next best step for a salesperson, and even sentiment analysis. So when I saw Viva Sales, it reminded me of something very specific. And this was an announcement at Microsoft Inspire in July 2021. So, over 12 months ago now. Satya Nadella stood up, he made this bold announcement that Teams customers will receive access to Dynamics 365 data within Teams at no extra cost, regardless of whether or not they have a Dynamics 365 license. I had some really interesting chats with the product groups and the people at Microsoft about this, that said, hey, Satya makes these great announcements, and then we have to go and figure out how we do this. This created a real buzz in the Dynamics partner channel and also the industry at the time, because if you can take that licensing tax out, that expensive, you need a Dynamics 365 license, that could massively impact user adoption. It could drive real momentum for Dynamics 365 sales pipeline. And when we did some more digging into what this was, all was not quite as may have been initially perceived. I think it turned out that this was then planned to be done via something known as collaborative apps. That is specific apps provided by Microsoft to control the data that can be accessed, annotated, and updated by users within Teams. So not a blanket free-for-all for Teams users to access Dynamics 365 data. The next thing that I did, the last thing that I did prior to this meeting, was just to see where we're up to with those collaborative apps. And it's still listed as in preview, not available if you go to the technical site. So they didn't really appear. I think Viva Sales is kind of superseding the premise that was collaborative apps and the premise that Satya gave here. They talked about supporting scenarios to enable salespeople to share details of sales opportunities, customer histories, key contacts. The same for customer service. It might include sharing the customer case record, sourcing troubleshooting steps, tracking follow-up tasks, and all of those things. And this was some screenshots of the kind of the collaborative apps where, if we go back over 12 months, they would show the ability to add Teams meetings, capture the notes of the timeline records, drive automated notifications, connect workflows. All of these things were announced sort of 12 months ago. So after we waited for wave 2, 2021, and wave 1, 2022, I had to make sure I got that right there. After we waited for those releases, I think Microsoft seemed to have branded this up now as Viva Sales. It makes perfect sense, and it goes part of the way to explaining what's coming in the Wave 2 2022 releases, which relies heavily on a concept of at mentions. So, in an email, if I typed at Joey W, it would suggest that Joey was the contact, and it would bring him onto the to line, bring him onto the CC line. That's what I mean when I talk about an at mention. So Viva Sales, I've taken a look through the Microsoft marketing material and the positioning. And as I said, it's about saving time on admin tasks from a seller perspective. So reclaiming what often gets lost. If you think of this in the eyes of a typical salesperson, we all love to fill data in CRM, right? And not just salespeople either in this instance. I think if I asked Joey how much he loved updating the CRM system here at Companion, as much as we love our internal implementation of Dynamics 365 sales, there's for sure an overhead that goes with it for all of the people who work in relationships with partners. So if you can cut out some of that data admin, whilst also bringing it contextually back into the tools that the sellers and relationship folks use on a daily basis, it can only be a good thing. And it's a big problem in the majority of CRM implementations out there with Dynamics. Let's be honest about this. So Microsoft talk about forms and data collection entry, data access and insights, momentum, follow-ups and actions. And they also then position Viva Sales around 4 areas specifically: capture, collaborate, engage, and customize. That's capture, collaborate, engage, and customize. And I think those 3 there talk about capture, collaborate, engage, and more about customize in a moment. I think that's probably still the weakest one. So Capture and tag to capture, add customers to your list, manage relationships more easily than ever. In this example, you can see the Outlook integration. It's through the web client, where a new contact is marked as a customer. All relatively kind of expected stuff. But then by using the menu that's opened just there in Excel, you can push that customer out to a My Customers list. And in that My Customers list, you can see some of the contextual information coming through. So mark as customer, add to my list in Excel, and then you'll see things like the last interaction field, the basic deal details, the sentiment analysis that's in there for this customer. So things that have come through from marketing, things that show you where that customer was last contacted by somebody within the organization. So that's what they mean about capture and the tab to capture side of things in Viva Sales. Next up was collaborate. And I think this is the one where people instantly go, yes, that will be useful. And it's about collaborating across your organization and using that at mention that I talked about to send customer details to your co-workers in Microsoft Teams. So the example here shows the contextual at mention in Teams of Inner Law, I believe the name is. There you go, click on it, and that's the one. And then the contact card is brought through to the conversation window by using the at mention capabilities for that contact. It also would work for the account, is my understanding. I'm not sure about how many other entities this will work for, whether it will work for deals and so on. There's still some things that remain unclear. But the key here is that once you're able to do that and you're able to share the information, when we talk about without a Dynamics 365 license, hopefully that data is stored in Teams, and we'll see kind of where that ends up. So that was the third piece. So that was capture, collaborate, and then the next one was engage. And in engage, this is about strengthening relationships with artificial intelligence. So gaining a deeper understanding with conversational intelligence, suggesting call summaries, call action items. This for me is the closest thing to the email. So in Outlook, your daily briefing, and then the video, you can see the post-meeting summary notes after a Teams meeting here and a transcription in Teams. And it shows there something that has been proposed by the suggestions in AI being scheduled for a follow-up action that's due this week, next week, whenever. And that will also sync back as an activity in theory into CRM. I've yet to see this working in practice. Public preview is available. And for those of you, when we distribute the slides after, some of you may have looked at this already, but if not, the how to set it up is on the link at the bottom of the slides here. So the action items there are AI driven. They're suggested in a Viva-like way, and that then synchronizes back to CRM. So for me, capture, collaborate, engage, I can really see uses there. I think customize here and creating dashboards in the flow of work. This is about personalizing. So download your customer list is how Microsoft say this, to see everything your way, and we'll keep it up to date for you. So on this example, we can see the contextual data in Excel from the previous example, the first one, with suggested items, connected co-workers coming through in the Viva Sales pane. So this is about putting the contact or the customer at the center of the experience and bringing the other three things together in a kind of a task pane, action pane, window, whatever you want to call it, at the side. And that there is the bulk of Microsoft Viva Sales. And it's all based around that at mention capability or contextual information in the right place. So why did Microsoft do this? I think if you look more broadly in the industry, the kind of the partnership, the joining forces, however you want to put it, of Salesforce and Slack, this is something that's already these capabilities are already there in those products. And these products come from a web-based kind of background, design up web first, unlike Dynamics, which has had to make the shift over a period of time. So what I want to say here, I want to talk a little piece about the any CRM system, because Microsoft have said, and this has been done publicly, statements, press release briefings, that this will also work with Salesforce.com. So when the data is surfaced through tools that people are used to working in, Outlook, Excel, it will also work with Salesforce.com. It feels very much like a surround strategy to say, okay, if you are using Salesforce, also Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Viva Sales is for you. And once you can start having the conversation about more Microsoft, there's always going to be more opportunity. I think it's just about being a better player in the industry. I don't 100% subscribe to any CRM because Microsoft have made it work with Dynamics 365 and Salesforce. There's nothing in there about HubSpot. There's nothing in there about any of the other kind of web-based applications, but this is a start. Whether that can be done through customization and how that fits remains to be seen. So then people say, or the next train of thought, the questions is, right, how much does this cost? And although I'm not fluent in Dutch, I did find the Dutch price list page. Hopefully that makes a whole lot more sense to you than it does to me, but I understand the €7.60 there. The truth is we don't know right now, and we don't know what SKUs this is going to be in. So I'm not saying this costs €7.60. I'm saying that if you go to the Microsoft Viva page right now, it'll talk about Viva connections, learning, insights, topics. It'll talk about all of these things, but what it won't talk about is Viva Sales. And so I'm still eagerly awaiting to understand which products and SKUs this will relate to. Given it's a new key part of the Dynamics strategy, I'd expect the use rights to be covered in all of the Dynamics 365 SKUs. So if you're a Dynamics user, you would expect this is available. Whether it's going to be part of Power Platform, whether you're going to be able to use the app mentioned for contacts and accounts if you only use Power Apps and Dataverse, remains to be seen. So we're just waiting to see there whether there's a separate SKU for Viva for Microsoft 365 customers, whether it's tied to Office 365, how it comes to market, we just don't know. We'll keep you up to date with the standard news that we provide out from Companion. But just to know, this is about ultimately driving increased productivity for salespeople. If you want to summarize it in a simple way, too much information overload. Don't worry about that now. Data contextually in the right place, don't need to switch apps, save time. And I think the slogan that summed it up for me was stop collecting, start connecting. And that's about get on with your work, get on with your job, and don't worry too much about the data capture. That should be in the right place. So when Sachi said that, I think they finally got to the point now, kind of 12, 18 months later, because this will be mainstream January 2023. But it's definitely an exciting piece, an exciting addition to Dynamics 365. So I said at the start, and I appreciate I might be talking slightly quickly. Let's just have a quick check-in on questions. Nothing there right now. Great. So I said at the start that I would talk about Viva Sales before I talked about the Wave 2 2022 release. The reason being is that when I looked through the briefing documents and I watched some of the videos and listened to people talk about what was in Wave 2 2022 and trying to pull as much of the information together, the biggest focus areas that were listed clearly were Teams and Outlook collaboration. And the work where you are, no license required to access data, the app mentioned Dynamics data. It was the standout point of Wave 2 2022. So I think what we've got here is the technical update that says that's one of the focus areas and we're going to allow you to do app mention. And then you've got the implementation of it, which is Viva Sales. But that's not to say that sales is the only place where you can use this app mention. It also filters through customer service and other places. There was also things around sales accelerator and process automation that I thought were interesting. The conversation intelligence, the transcriptions recording, kind of seen a little bit of a demonstration of that. Again, you can see the usage of it in Viva Sales. And I think, a Wave update can be quite dry, but seeing that in action with that little demonstration video that was there really brings it to life. And then the other area was reporting. There was updates and reporting. So we've talked too much about this already, but live email and chat can be edited and updated back in Dynamics. That's something that we haven't yet seen kind of a demonstration of, or the ability on how to do. But the idea is that those Teams chat windows, the timeline in Dynamics, all of those things will work much more seamlessly together. And the other thing that was interesting is that record preview. If you used to share a record from Dynamics, it would share the link. Now you actually get a preview of the record, so you can see some of the data in place. In customer service, and there was the addition to the swarming feature, where you can have multiple people working on a case together, where everybody can see the card, the case, and work with it and work on it. So you've not got independent service reps working individually on cases. You can work as a swarm, and there's enhancements there. Within sales, so I think one of the there's always a need to create a kind of a default folder structure, and keeping people on track in order to use that is always going to be a challenge. So there's a Teams templated folder structure for consistent collaboration, is how I wrote this down. So if you do integration with Teams and Dynamics 365 Sales, for example, you have the templated folder structure now, where things are, can be consistently stored and not spread everywhere. There's a deal room dashboard. I have a screenshot of that further on for key stakeholders. And then I talked about embedding Teams chat and linking that to the timeline. So where there is app mention, where there is something about an account, that will filter back through into the Dynamics interface as well, and not just be visible in Teams. So the Sales Accelerator, process automation enhancements to sequencing, where you can keep track of what's going on, whether that's playbook process, whether it's time scheduled. So the example given here is around a new website lead, and the ability then to create a sequence to schedule follow-up actions. So as the lead lands, the sequence gets created. All of those actions, you can create auto replies for emails. If somebody downloads, goes to a download and downloads a white paper, for example. This will also now work with custom tables and manual or automatic rules. It can connect to the marketing capabilities sequencing now. So from a marketing qualified lead through sales to progress to sales qualified lead. And you can also start to push tasks out to multiple sellers, so where it's not just one person responsible for the flow of lead. So those enhancements are coming in the Sales Accelerator for the process automation. Probably for me, the second biggest area of enhancement outside of Viva Sales that mentioned was marketing. And there's a lot of things here around moments-based marketing, where you can trigger off a journey. Now you could trigger off other capabilities previously, but you can now trigger off a journey, and that can be based on real-time actions also. The other things that kind of sit in here for me, the ability to handle multiple brands through separation via business units. So yes, the slides will be shared, Mark, a great question. So each business unit can have its own brand assets associated with it. This is kind of key, because at the minute, Microsoft Marketing, single brand, but multi-brand by business units, that's now enabled. There's a new lead. So if I go back to the moments-based marketing, sorry, I started reading the slide and not my notes at one point. You can base this on real-time action. So a marketeer can set follow-ups almost instantaneously based on interactions that are happening. And that's what I mean about the white paper download and so on. From a customer data platform perspective, there's an advanced AI churn model in there that will become available in Customer Insights. That's designed to help mitigate the risk of losing customers as much as possible. There's a new lead capture form becoming available. It also looks like the design is different. I haven't had the chance to check too much into that right now. The ability to help with the next best content for someone through the design phase is kind of there, because content ideas are being added to a creation of things such as marketing emails. And then if you go back to the communications journey, the ability to branch off custom tasks that can be assigned to individual sellers, and also the ability to trigger not just a task, but also a sequence from a marketing journey is in there. But finally, there's something being introduced called frequency caps, which can be applied to journeys. You don't want customers overwhelmed by too many communications. So you can put a frequency cap on there that says, we've emailed them 18 times already today. That's probably overkill already, but you see what I mean. The customer would be like, you know what, just stop. So you can actually put frequency caps in now to help measure and monitor those the rhythm of how you talk to your customers. If I had a little bit more time to prep, and no offense, this is always going to be a work in progress. I'd have probably done the slide builds a little bit better, but you can see here the content ideas in the marketing email. That there is a journey with sequencing and branching, and here's the new kind of lead generation form designer with the elements on the side. And I was hoping there was something else on the side there, but there's not. Customer service, enhanced capabilities, teams integration, so case swarming enhancements, basically agents, subject matter experts can swarm cases in the applications they are accustomed to using. So that's, again, bringing it back into Teams, including customer service workspace, Microsoft Teams, richer agent experience with improved swarm creation flow, the ability to create notes, tasks, to manage the swarm process. And also it talks about, and there's very little detail on some of these, it talks about enhanced wrap-up activities. Remains to be seen what that actually is. The AI-generated conversation summary is really going to be powerful here. To enable an agent to then collaborate with other agents, supervisors, sales engagements managers, again, all back in Microsoft Teams. In Omnichannel, there is the ability now to leave a voicemail to reserve a place in a queue for auto callback. It talks about that in there. It talks about the admin experience to configure service level agreements and KPIs, skills to handle routing. All of that has become much more simplified and much easier. One really interesting thing in the SLA piece here, you can so SLAs are very kind of linear in right now. They start 48 hours is up, but you can actually measure those based on active or on hold duration. So you can actually place a service level agreement on pause. And by placing it on pause, then the measurement of the time it takes to complete changes, waiting on customer, for example, customer doesn't respond for 3 weeks. You're not in breach of your SLA there that you've promised. So being able to place something on pause after an amount of time is also in the customer service side there. Dashboards and reporting. The sales dashboard, there's a new seller dashboard in there, my day, my reflections, things that are pertinent to me as a seller and what I can see and how I'm progressing across my accounts, my leads, my opportunities. The marketing dashboard, there's a new one of those to track top performing journeys and channels. Customer service dashboard has personal filters on there now. Not 100% sure on that, but I'm assuming you can basically create a view that's relevant to yourself. And then the Teams account, the deal dashboard, is about collaboration across the organization. So you can see the seller dashboard on the left there in the summary view. How many mails, how many calls, how many texts, all of those things, my activities remaining, my workload, my job queue, things that I need to get through, whether that's outbound calling, whether that's connecting on LinkedIn, all of those things are on there. There's the marketing dashboard again with some of the very Power BI looking features, which is always good to see, and also kind of the sales hub and the account, the summary dashboard there with top users, so people who are actually updating account record, people who aren't and would be at the bottom of that list, and so on. So a bit of tracking in there as well on that dashboard from a organizational perspective. That was it from a Dynamics 365 release. It would have been unfair to not also cover the Power Platform release. I think this is key because the two things are separate, but the two things are also very, very relevant and very much the same together. So Power Platform release, Wave 2 2022. The focus areas that I saw here were, I didn't look at the Power Automate, I'm going to be honest, it's one of those things, it's kind of too much time. I'm still work in progress. Power Pages and model-driven apps for me were the two focus areas that stood out at the top of the list. Power Pages, you may or may not know, is a replacement for Power Portals. Power Portals was Dynamics 365 Portals, was ADX Studio. You can go all the way back to kind of 2015 with Microsoft through the acquisition there. But two new templates, Permit App, submission and employee onboarding experience are going to be provided in Power Pages. Studio Designer, low-code drag-drop experience for lists, grids, all of those things. File upload extensions, forms upgrades. So really making it much easier for a designer to kind of create a Power Pages. My mind goes back to things like Microsoft Publisher, and go back kind of 15, 20 years here, but trying to create it trying to make it very simple in a low code, no code way for users to be able to create these Power Pages now, rather than having to do some of the heavy lifting that you've had to do previously. So that all goes in there. Model-driven apps, form components, related records, editable over and above quick views, grid controls, nested grids, groups, aggregation. This was interesting because when you scroll in a grid right now, and this does relate to Dynamics 365 as well, obviously, because it's kind of one of the lower levels, you have to page to see more records. What they're saying here is that there will be infinite scrolling, so the paging will happen automatically. So that's quite an interesting one. The fact that you can do inline editing within the views and within the subgrids, and in addition to being available for read-only scenarios, you can now create a control as an editable grid. That needs to be enabled by the maker, but it is there. You're also going to be able to have nested grids. So if you expand a row to see a grid of related records, then multiple rows in the grid can also be expanded simultaneously. It's just like a standard tree view. It's almost like this stuff was expected functionality, but it's never been in there. So they're changing some of the small things as well. Grouping is interesting. Organized tabular data, group the data based on one column. Each group of rows can be expanded, collapsed, and desires. And then finally, aggregation. So on numeric columns within a grid, users can choose to see if the total, the minimum value, the maximum value, the average of values for that column. And if you've applied grouping, the aggregate value will also be displayed for each group. That's very much like in my mind, that's very much like a Power BI matrix. So anybody who's familiar with Power BI, where you can set up that data aggregation and grouping, to bring that straight into Power Platform, model-driven apps, and hopefully Dynamics 365 sales, customer service, really powerful. Power Virtual Agents, you can see there. So I don't know why the word with is on the end there. Templated adaptive cards and creating bots using low code. I think I was going to put without the need to write code, left it off there. So low code bots in PVA. There's very little detail on that one when I look into it. Power Automate, dynamic content editor, data types and structures says they're overhauled. And then sequential approvals can be triggered from model-driven apps with multi-level stages in an approval process. Not the hottest bit there on my session today. This bit was really interesting on Power FX, because Power FX is it's kind of like a expression language, but you can create. So it's very, very Excel-like. If you use Excel formulas, then learning Power FX shouldn't be something that's too difficult for you. If you're not aware what Power FX is, I would really recommend that you take a look at it. This has really been in Canvas-driven apps, and it's been the language that's been used in there. So what they're now saying in Dynamics and in the business apps, the business rules designer, where you create the business rules, the if, the and you do the branching. Business rules are going to be able to be created using Power FX. And that should bring a whole lot more flexibility and a whole lot more power to that designer, and also speed things up significantly for people who are creating business rules. Then it's also coming into model-driven apps calculated columns. So when I talked about the calculated columns there for aggregation, you're going to be able to do that via Power FX formulas. So I guess if you are a designer, you are a maker, and you are kind of down in the detail of the grids and the data views back, Power FX is something that will be coming more and more to the fore. It's not difficult to learn if you understand Excel formulas. As I say, there's something that you can do there to help you get up to speed much more quickly. On to Dataverse, and Dataverse as a whole, it talks about virtual tables. It talks about sharing Dataverse tables across environments, and that accounts and contacts can be shared across environments and then usable by multiple model-driven apps. struggled to find a scenario where that would be relevant in the way that I've always designed things, but there must be some need for it out there. And if you have one, great, please let me know what it is, because I'd love to understand more there. But accounts and contacts shared across environments and used by multiple model-driven apps is one of the things that's listed. The ability to connect to external data. So SQL tables, Excel Online, and having them behave like data tables rendered within the model-driven app. That's powerful and quite exciting, because you can work with them as if they're just native in Dataverse with native data. Then the enhancements to Power Apps Studio for the table data, the Studio experience to move columns around. There was enhancements to APIs plugins. You can see there I didn't get a chance to finish that bit off. And then Power FX for business rules was the other piece. So in general, they're grid control enhancements, edit inline, aggregate totals. Modern advanced find is going to be enabled by default. I'd be surprised if any customer is still using the old. Clunky find, modern advanced find is going to be turned on the search bar, much easier. Power BI, quick reports in Power Apps, the ability to visualize views in Power BI through Power Apps, that's coming in this wave as well. And then embedding model-driven apps within a form, and related records on the forms, editables for the business process flow. And then embedded Teams chat was the other one, also in Power Apps, not just for kind of customer service. So that looks like that will be in accounts and contacts, but again, no model-driven app license required for when you're working in Teams. We've just got to wait and see how that plays out through the licensing guide. So I appreciate that was a lot in 38 minutes. I've got one last bit to cover. Which is Dataverse integration with Business Central. Joey's still looking like he's smiling, so I haven't lost him. We're okay. Hopefully you're all the same. Start the questions coming in if you want to. The last piece I wanted to talk about today, and I'll kind of cover this quickly, the Dataverse integration with Business Central. The synchronization out of the box, but there are other ways that you can do it. If you know Power Platform inside out, it's not just Dataverse. Obviously, you've got Power Apps, Power Automate, Power BI. If there's anybody on the call from the Business Central side of the fence, probably very familiar with Power BI. Hopefully, you're getting more and more familiar now with Power Apps and Power Automate, but Dataverse is the key to everything here because that's the business data platform. We know the odd one out is still Business Central. All the CRM apps, D365 Sales, Service, Field Service, Project Operations, F and SCM, they're all kind of Dataverse, and Business Central still isn't, and we know that's the case. So therefore, there is a need within the lower end of the market in SMB, where we all kind of work and serve, to potentially integrate Dataverse with Business Central, because Microsoft still don't have a strong story here. There are lots of questions around multiplexing. I wouldn't want to start to go into that today. I have lots of complicated and convoluted, complex conversations with partners around, am I multiplexing? The answer could be yes or no, depending on a myriad of scenarios. I think the key things here that I would like you to all be aware of is if you are looking to connect Business Central to Dataverse, we've identified 5 ways in which you could possibly do this, each with their own separate pros and cons. So one of them is the out-of-the-box data synchronization. 2 is virtual tables. 3 is the way that you could do it through data flows. 4 is through Power Automate, or kind of Power Automate's big brother Azure Logic apps. And 5 is through the connector or connector-based integration. When we've looked, and the technical team, my colleagues, my companion colleagues based in Vilnius have done a heck of a lot of work and a heck of a lot of investigation here, finding out what works well, what doesn't work well. And if there's a need for any of you to understand more there, we can help with through kind of services, through your funds and so on and so forth, what's needed, because we've really got the expertise. Don't make the mistakes that we've made. Allow us to kind of help educate you on these things. So data synchronization, for example, is really simple because it's driven through the Business Central user interface. You've got native table mapping, so that's all good. But challenges come when you have to handle conflicts. So the example that I always see in the country code GB and UK, one in CRM, one in Business Central. How do you handle that conflict resolution from a synchronization perspective? The other downside there is it's not ad hoc, it's not live, it works on a schedule. So it works on a refresh basis. So data synchronization, great, but has limitations. And that's the kind of the Microsoft out of the box bit. I think that's the bit where if you go down that route, you are more likely to avoid multiplexing, because you can legitimately say that the data master is CRM and not Business Central if you're kind of looking at it from that perspective. Next up is virtual tables, really powerful. So real-time integration, you have one master, you don't have conflicts because you are actually virtually looking at the data in Business Central. Therefore, you would probably be multiplexing if you went down that route, and you probably would need a Business Central license. There's more tables available through virtual tables rather than the kind of the out-of-the-box synchronization right now. But then on the downside, you can't trigger Power Automate flows. You can't, because the data isn't in Dataverse, it won't work with portals or Power Pages it is now. Data flows, again, you've got one master and you've got native table mapping, so those kind of, it's configuration only, you don't have to code it. But then on the downside, it would be one directional only, so you wouldn't be able to do bi-directional updates. Again, it'd work on a schedule, and we found that data flows weren't very performant when it came to rendering Business Central data through Power Platform interfaces. Power Automate and Azure Logic Apps, probably the most powerful way of doing it. Actually, it's bi-directional. It can be low code. You don't need development skills, but the bad news is that you've got to write all of the logic yourself, and then the overheads, you've got to maintain it all yourself over time. So be aware of what you're getting into there. You will get the power if you use Azure Logic Apps for sure, but you will also have to keep that maintained. Finally, connector based, you can connect to the BC directly, which is great. You can build low code apps for mobile, which is great, but the out of the box connector does have limitations. It's limited to the Business Central API supported tables and fields, and we found much complexity if you try and do that in Canvas apps. You can of course create your own connectors, and that's something that would help overcome some of those things, but just be aware that those are the kind of the main pros and cons. As I say, we can do that a whole more in depth through a services engagement. One other thing to note, consider where the data is synchronized, because on 1, 3, and 4, if you were synchronizing, Microsoft would also allow you the privilege to pay to store the data in both Business Central and Dataverse. So if you're keeping it in sync, just think about the storage costs and the fact that you would probably have to pay twice. One other flag, and this is the last slide for the day, Dataverse integration on premises. It's not Business Central, it's Nav, it's Navision. For me, I've been around long enough to know that the Microsoft documentation is not totally accurate. That's the best way I can find of putting that sentiment. I've put the link down there about how you can do this. But don't just believe it, because you have to be running Nav 2018 cumulative update 41 or higher. We had a conversation with a really great partner of ours in the UK. They were running cumulative update 3, Nav 2018. Told them it could do it. Microsoft documentation said they can do it. No, they can't, unfortunately, was the answer. So I just want you to be absolutely 100% aware of that. So that's the end of the slides. Appreciate that was a lot, and I've talked a lot. Joey?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. Well, you talked a lot, but there's also a lot to talk about. So, and I think you make it very easy for partners to get all the information. So you've done a lot of work for them. Interesting to see that there's a lot of work being done, especially Viva Sales. There's of course a lot of solutions that Microsoft has, and it's great to see that it's started to connect more and more. And hopefully it will be connecting better with Business Central in the future as well.
Absolutely, and hopefully people, I'm just going to slowly slide that out the way. That's our IT department. Checking that I'm still safe. Blessed. Love those. Joey, there's a question in the window from Ken. Which connection to BC do you prefer from the 5 options? Horses for courses is the saying in the UK. I don't know if you have an equivalent, Joey. It means about suitability, fitness for purpose. Some
I don't know.
horses run better jumping over fences. Some run straight better on the flat.
Okay.
It depends on the situation and it depends on the scenario. I think if you just want to render Business Central data, virtual tables, put your multiplexing. If you want synchronization out of the box is great. The third one, Azure Logic Apps, probably 1, 2, and 4 on that list were the for me the things that are the most powerful. 4, but comes with the most overheads. 2, the easiest one to render the data, but you really have to say you're multiplexing because you're accessing the data directly. 1, great, but just be aware it's working on a schedule and you have to handle conflict resolution. Data connector as well, of course. And it just depends on the need. It depends on what you're trying to do. So I don't have a favorite, but if you wanted to talk more about your scenario, then your place. Oh, it says Yol, Rene. I'm assuming that's Rene Yol. Which option for data sync do you recommend to sync master data over several BC databases? This is. Wouldn't it have been nice if Microsoft actually allowed you to do this out of the box? Because it's, in my opinion, ridiculous that they don't. You can only synchronize one BC instance to a kind of a Dataverse environment. And when I think about, that model-driven apps where it says you're going to allow data, accounts and contacts to be used over other environments, maybe, Rene, there is something there that we could think about using in the future. I don't recommend the options because you're going to have to, you're asking about synchronization specifically, and you're going to have massive overheads if you're going to write that yourselves, and the out of the box stuff just does not work. So I appreciate the question. It's a really good question. And I'm thinking more and more about that all the time. And now with the piece in there about accounts and contacts being able to be shared beyond environments, multiple environments, I said I couldn't think of a use case for it. But it may be that works. We'll look into that more moving forwards. 2 good questions there.
Well, thank you for answering then, Chris. Some good questions and I see good answers. Well, I see that there aren't any other questions in the chat. So I want to thank you for your presentation of today, Chris. And everybody else, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Thanks, Joey, and thanks everyone for listening in.
Yeah, and the next 2 weeks, we have 2 more presentations. We have a presentation next Friday for marketing guys about the solution, marketing solution. And the week after that on Thursday, so not on Friday, but on Thursday, our partner Business Base will give a presentation about how you can use customer service with omnichannel. So 2 more interesting presentations for you. Thank you, everybody, and have a good day.